Hello everyone and welcome back to the Champions Showdown. It's round 3 and it's Magnus Carlsen versus Fabiano Caruana, two old rivals as the two of them played a World Chess Championship match in 2020. But this is Chess960 and here anything can happen. And it's a pretty wild position. It's not like in the game Carlsen versus Kasparov. Here you already have the queens facing bishops and it's pretty crazy. The kings are in the center of the board and the rooks are on the C and F file. But again, only after a few moves the position will resemble normal chess. Now, before we check out the actual game, I have two very short announcements. First one, Grgur from the YouTube channel Lignum made a chessboard for me. It's a custom-made chessboard, and there's an entire video about how he crafts it, how he works with the wood. So if you guys are interested in that, do check it out. It will be the first link in the description below. And second announcement, AGADMATOR is added again. He's on a quest to say sorry about that 101,000 times. So if you guys are interested in that, check it out. It will be the second link in the description below. Now let's continue with the game. Magnus with the white pieces opens with knight to f3, so sort of a Chess960 reti going on. We have g6, makes sense. You want to open up this bishop's diagonal, and the g3. Magnus will do the same. We have c5, striking in the center, and the d3. We have knight to c6, going after that d4 square. This is the idea behind Fabi's opening, and bishop to c3. Now Magnus wants to trade off this very strong bishop, and if Fabi trades, Magnus immediately gets his knight into the game. So Fabi, of course, declines this. We have knight to f6. And now Magnus cleared everything needed for castling, and here he just castles. So for those of you who are only joining us and don't know how castling works in Chess960, you just move your king to the right or to the left 2 squares like you would in regular chess, and after you do that, the pieces end up in the exact same spot as they would if you were playing regular chess. So that's all there is about it. We have d6 by Fabi. Continuing development, preparing to bring the bishop into the game, and knight b to d2, with ideas of maybe striking in the center with e4. Bishop d7 from Fabi, and b3 now. Now both the bishop and the queen are acting on this diagonal, so the knight has to be very careful. We have e5, closing up the diagonal, and, now knight to c4. By playing e5, Fabi really weakened the d6 pawn, so Magnus immediately goes after it. Knight to c4 goes after the d6 pawn. Fabi defends it, queen to b8, and now, of course, Magnus doesn't want to allow b5 from Fabi, so he plays a4. He doesn't want his knight to be kicked away from the c4 square. We have castles by Fabi. He also cleared everything needed for castling here, so castles, and e3. Just nicely setting up a solid position. And here Fabi goes bishop to h3, puts pressure on the rook here, rook to e1, and now h6, taking away the g5 square from Carlsen's pieces. Also at some point, knight to h7 followed by f5 will be an idea. We have knight f to d2. Preparing to shift the knight over to the center. We have rook c to d8 and now rook to b1. Again, maybe with ideas of playing b4 at some point. Queen to c7 by Fabi, and now e4 by Magnus. If you go for something like this, it's very dangerous. For example, captures, and while you do open up some lines here, maybe you could even double up rooks here. Like e4 is coming once Fabi opens up this diagonal. He's the one with the bishop pair. He still has a dark square bishop. You don't, and it could be very tricky. So instead, after this queen to c7 move, Magnus plays e4, and now he controls the d5 square, but he gives up control of the d4 square. So Fabi immediately grabs this outpost for his knight. Knight to d4, and now Magnus wants to improve the position of this knight, as it's one of his pieces that's not doing all that much. So he shifts this knight to e3. This knight cannot come to d5, and he freed up the c4 square for this knight. So just improving the position of your pieces. We have bishop back to e6, grabbing control of this d5 square, and now knight d to c4, just improving the position of his pieces. And now finally knight to h7. Fabi is now ready to strike with, well, obviously not that, but with f5. and if Magnus trades, it's going to be very good for him, and also he can just continue pushing with f4. So Magnus decides to remove one of the defenders of the f5 square. Bishop captures on d4. We have c captures on d4, attacking the knight. Knight to d5, attacking the queen. And here we have captures. And now there are no more defenders of the f5 square, so Fabi is free to push. So f5. And Fabi is doing very well here. Magnus needs to decide how to activate the queen and how to do something with his rooks. His knight is an excellent piece. His bishop is also very nice. So here, c3, opening up the c file, and this will definitely activate the white queen. So here Fabi trades, d captures on c3, we have queen captures, and now queen to f7. Although you could make a discovery here with e4, it doesn't really do all that much. Queen d2 goes after the h6 pawn, which is undefended, and I mean, what are you going to do? Grab on d3, you only help Magnus. It's his pawns that are doubled, so... you don't really gain anything by doing this, and maybe you want to save it, maybe you want to go f4 later on. So here queen to f7, Fabi now even prepares f4, and now queen back to d2, going after this h6 pawn. F4 by Fabi, defending while attacking, and now bishop to e4, not allowing f3 to close up his light square bishop, so bishop to e4, and knight to g5 now. Fabi's pieces are coming closer and closer to Carlsen's king. We have queen to e2, grabbing more control of the f3 square, and also if the queen somehow gets to the h3 square, you want to be able to play queen to f1 to prevent any checkmating ideas. And here Fabi does exactly that. He goes queen to d7, prepares to launch the queen to h3, but also gives up the g6 pawn. And here, again, it's a rapid game, not a lot of time on the clock. Going for bishop captures on g6 would be maybe too greedy, even though it is playable. For example, bishop captures, and after captures, you run into knight f3 check. Fabi would win the exchange, but you would have compensation because you've, well, opened up the black king. However, Magnus first goes king to h1. This fixes all of his issues, as he doesn't have to worry about any checks, but he gives Fabi the move. So rook to f6. Fabi now defends the g6 pawn, and he still retains all the threats. Rook to g1 by Magnus. Now, with ideas of maybe opening up the g file, as the Fabi's king still occupies the g file, but now rook d to f8. Now, piling up on the f file. Now captures is possible, just pushing the pawn is possible. Magnus has to take a lot of it into consideration. And while you could try and open up the g file by capturing on f4, for example, after rook captures and bishop captures here, you allow rook captures on f2. And now you cannot allow queen h3, so you'd have to go queen to h5, and now it's well, it's a very, very tricky position. For example, black could go rook to f3 with ideas of rook h3 followed by rook captures, which would end the game. But luckily, Magnus would have rook to b2. And now you have to trade rooks, because if you persist, then white gives up the queen, and white will be better here. For example, you just capture the rook, and after rook captures on h5, you're going to capture here. And it's, well, white has... sufficient not sufficient. Black doesn't really have any moves here. For example, bishop g7, rook g4, you close up all of the files and diagonals, and it would be very hard for black to even try and find a move here. Like this knight doesn't have anywhere to go. It's pretty crazy stuff. The bishop completely locked in, the queen unable to join the party. So white would be better here. Now, well, that is something to consider. Magnus decides to go for g4 instead. But this allows Fabi, well, just a beautiful opportunity to win the exchange, which he goes for. Knight to h3, puts pressure on the rook, and now Magnus doesn't want to react to this rook, so rather he just plays f3. He gives up the exchange, but in doing so, something beautiful happens. Here, Fabi takes the exchange, knight captures on g1, rook captures, and here, if you look at it, it's very, very difficult for Fabi to even find use for his rooks. Now, with his pawn structure being as it is, the rooks are pretty much useless here. The bishop not really doing all that much, and it's a question what the queen will do here. So here, Fabi goes g5. He wants to probably open up the position with h5, but Magnus beats him to the punch. He goes h4. Fabi captures on h4, and now queen to f2 goes after this pawn, but also after the a7 pawn. And the a7 pawn is even more important because queen g7 by Fabi, and now queen captures on a7. And now with the a7 pawn removed, black will no longer have the option of something like a6, b5. And with this pawn structure as it is, the knight cemented on c4, the rooks will never be able to enter the game, the bishop will not be able to enter the game, and the queen will not be able to enter the game. So all of this white got by sacrificing the exchange, and it's just amazing. Black is without a move here. So Fabi goes queen e7. King to h2 by Magnus, just improving the position of the king. We have rook to f7, rook 6 to f7, and now queen to b6, getting the queen out of the way, going after the d6 pawn now. Rook to d8 defending, and now rook to c1. Magnus wants to get rid of this knight. He will shift the knight over to d2, move the bishop, place the knight to e4, and he wants to bring this rook to c7 at some point if it will be possible. So bishop to f6 by Fabi. If you try h5, white will just ignore you. He can either capture or even push g5. You can never capture because rook g1 just wins the queen. And if you do anything else, let's say rook g7, you already have support from the bishop, and this is just amazing for white. So here after rook to c1, we have bishop to f6. Fabi wants to prepare this opening of the position, but now knight d2. Magnus continues with his plan of shifting the knight over here. We have rook g7, and now bishop to f5. Just serving as additional support here. Bishop to e6 check will be an idea in the future. We have h5, and here Magnus just captures it. We have g captures here, and now e4. He wants to open up some lines to go after Carlsen's king, but it's not easy, so he does have to give back some material. And here h6 looks very strong. h6 attacks the rook. Also you have support for h7, but Magnus first prepares it. Knight captures on e4, puts pressure on the bishop, and now bishop to b2. Getting bishop out of the way, attacking Carlsen's rook, but now rook c2 again attacks the bishop, and bishop back to a3 now. Now, okay, the pawn is defended twice, but now comes h6 from Carlsen. Rook to g3, trying to give back the exchange in order to create some attacking chances here. Of course, Magnus not interested in this. He couldn't care less about that rook. He just goes rook to c7. A very nice rook lift. Black unable to block. The bishop covers the d7 square. He has to move. He plays queen to f8. But now, of course, the position is completely winning. It's mate in 6 with best play from white. So feel free to pause the video and win the game for Magnus while I give you a couple of seconds. So for those of you who were able to do it, congratulations on finding any move in the position, as any move here wins. It would be incredibly difficult to find a move in this position that doesn't win the game. And for those of you who just want to enjoy the show, it's bishop to e6, or bishop to h7, or queen to d4, or just any move, because it's all winning here. Bishop to e6 is the quickest. This is mate in 6. Magnus chose bishop to h7 check, but it's the same line, so it doesn't really matter. So here, king to h8 and queen to d4 with check. And it was in this position that Fabiano Caruana resigned the game, as there is nothing more to be done here. You could block with the queen, with the rook, but I mean, that's just giving up material. For example, rook blocks, you'll deliver this with check. If queen captures, then of course queen captures is checkmate, so you'd have to capture here. Now you can even grab this and bring a knight into the game with a nice double check. And after king h6, just rook to h7 is checkmate, because the knights cover both g5 and the g6 squares. So yeah, once again, I do hope you enjoyed it. Really amazing game for Magnus. And just so I don't forget, here are the standings, on the cross table from the Chess24 website. Sorry about that, that's not the cross table. Just give me a second. There we go. All right, so this is the cross table from Chess24 website. Let's just check it out to see who's doing how. So the leaders after the first day, after the 3 rounds, are Magnus Carlsen and Alireza Dominguez, followed by the official world chess 960 champion Wesley with 2 points, and then we have a lot of people with 1.5 points: Hikaru Nakamura, Garry Kasparov, Levon Aronian, Fabiano Caruana, Peter Svidler, Alireza Firouzja with 0.5 point, and Maxime Vachier-Lagrave with 0 out of 3. So tough tournament for Maxime. We'll see if it improves for him. And yeah, Magnus only lost one draw to that Kasparov game, where Kasparov wiggled out with that sneaky rook move that it was really just a beautiful bluff, and it really threw Magnus off his game. And then after having a great game in round 1 and 2 against Alireza and Magnus, Kasparov lost in his game 3 to Peter Svidler. So that's what happened in day 1. We'll see what happens in day 2. So once again, I do hope you enjoyed these games. I'm very excited, as in the like 2 years ago, I didn't really enjoy Chess960, but now I'm a huge fan of the Chess960, because I just realized it's nothing but a new position already as of move 1, and what could be greater than that. Once again, I would like to thank Chess with Suyash, Advait Palakodeti, Jenny Juvonen, David Kimura, and Tyler Hummel for your contribution to my channel. Thank you a lot, I really appreciate it. As usual, you can check 2 of my previous videos here. Thank you for watching, and I will see you soon, continuing the coverage of the Champions Showdown, checking up on your wonderful suggestions and whatever else happens in the chess world. Thank you all, I will see you soon, and have an excellent rest of your weekend, and do check out the 2 links in the description below. See you soon.